start. Okay, so hi, thanks for coming. This is Breaking into Anime Journalism. My name is Zach Barchi. I'm the executive editor at Anime News Network, and joining me is...
my name is Bamboo. I'm the managing editor at Anime News Network.
It says in the panel description guide that basically this panel, we're here to tell you how to get a job writing about anime. And by job, I mean paid work, not for exposure, none of that. I'm talking about getting paid to write about this stuff. We're going to tell you what jobs there are, what those jobs are like, and how to get a better job than the ones that are currently available. And we'll talk a little bit about our jobs and what we do. I'll start with that. So my job at Anime News Network is I manage all of our opinion, editorial, convention coverage. That includes interviews, feature articles, reviews, the summer preview guide, which is happening right now on the site. Basically anything on the site that is opinion related. It's all over there in the right-hand column. That's all me and my team. Baby, do you want to talk about what you do?
Yeah, so I manage the interest feed, and those are the articles that appear on the main news feed that are in purple, and it says interest, and it's usually, it's kind of the lighter, fluffier side of news, and I also have a weekly column called Shelf Life.
Right. We're going to talk a little bit about getting jobs in news. It's a different skill set, but largely this will be about interest feed type stuff and working in opinion. I know the title of the panel is journalism, but this is more opinion based. Which, frankly, if both of us work in entertainment journalism, which isn't the same as working at like CNN. We're not reporting on the war, not that CNN does, but we're not. It's entertainment journalism. It's different from regular news. So first, I want to talk about the history of this panel. I used to run this panel like 4 or 5 years ago, and it eventually got to a point where there just weren't any jobs. Nobody was hiring. Most anime news, most of our competitors went out of business. There's no such thing as print anymore, except for Otaku USA. And in my opinion, the only real way to work there is if you are friends with Patrick Macias or a friend of Patrick, and that's how that publication generally operates. Which is great work if you can get it, but it's also the only print option. So this will focus entirely on getting jobs online, which is where all of that work lives. And the jobs that are available now. So I wanted to get an idea, does anybody in here already work as a freelance journalist? That's your job. You two. You're both paid journalists?
Freelance by myself.
Okay. So just two folks. Who wants to get a job as a freelance journalist? Like that's your career goal. Okay. Just a few. Got 3 or 4. So those jobs, you're in luck, exist. You can get them. Right now, you're stuck working in the online economy. See, they're excited. You guys. Right now, you're stuck working in the online economy, and unfortunately, as a freelance writer, the pay is not very good. Anybody who currently works as a freelance journalist will tell you they need to have. My friends who are still freelance, who don't do this full time for a living, they keep, on average, a rotating number like maybe 9 or 10 gigs, and that's just to maybe keep food on the table, and oftentimes they have to supplant that with a 9 to 5. So it's a tough line of work. I did it for a while right when I got out of college, but I was lucky enough to get into this when print still existed. So I went straight into a magazine and then came back to online when print started dying. I got very lucky. But those are the jobs that presently exist in multiples. You can get freelance writing work. That's the good news. It does exist. You can get paid to do this. Before I get into like the exact type of work you're going to wind up doing, just out of curiosity, do you have anybody who really does want to work in news itself, like you want to write entertainment news? Okay, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's okay. So would you agree with this? Basically, if you want to work in actual news writing, right now the chief skill you need is Japanese reading and writing.
Yeah. unless you're willing to branch out into things other than anime news. You know,
Right.
if you're willing to work for like for a general nerd site, you know, that might be a little bit of anime and manga and a little bit of like video games, comics, like that's probably still okay. But if you want to work for a place like ANN, like you should probably be able to read Japanese at a fluent level.
Yeah, that's where all that news comes from. We have to have a staff of news writers and interns who sit there and scroll through Japanese news sites and message forums for the latest news, and if you can't read anything that's on those boards, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's sort of the new thing. We used to just hire English speakers and then some translators, but now having both of those things, that's sort of the new rule if you're going to get hired to do news. Now you mentioned general interest nerd sites, and I'll tell you, most of those places will not pay you. There's a billion of them. There are so many Me Too, nerd news, Wolverine, the Doctor Who, whatever the hell, you know, the same generic Star Wars stuff that everybody reports on. There's so many of them that the ones that are actually going to hire you aren't going to pay you. I can give you some stats on what you can expect pay-wise. ANN, and I'm proud of this fact because I started as freelance and I've tried to keep these rates high. Our rates are high. We pay about $75 for a column. That's if you're a columnist. So if anyone reads like Mike Till's show or, well, Jason Thompson's rate's a little bit higher, $75 to $100 is about what we pay per. Now, the average site that you will work for, nerd news, any kind of like Mediaite, Gawker especially, if you get a Gawker job, God help you. They pay much less than that. You're talking about $20 a post. So imagine how much of that you're going to have to write in a day in order to put food on your table and keep the lights on. It's a lot of work, and that's sort of the harsh reality of internet entertainment journalism. The pay isn't very good. If you can get a gig with us, like I think my freelance cap is $300 a month, and you can get extra work on top of that if you do other things. That's considered, like when I tell people those rates, they're like, what? How do I get a job doing that? And I'm like, man, it's peanuts, but that's what the job pays. And if you string enough of those jobs together, so like you work for us, you work for Topless Robot, if people are familiar with Topless Robot, they have a similar pay structure to ours, and that's because I told Rob Bricken to pay those rates when he was starting that site. They have a pay structure similar to ours. If you string enough of those together, you can make a living doing it. It's tough, and you're going to be sweating month to month, but you can do it. And the point of going through the freelance gauntlet, this is the music that plays when you're going through the freelance gauntlet. The point of doing that is to eventually turn it into a full-time job. And the full-time jobs are what we have. Those require even more skills. So, say like you want to go into entertainment journalism as a living, the odds that you're going to be able to make a living just as a writer, those are a little lower. And if you want stability, you want a regular paycheck, it's not dependent on your page views, it's not dependent on how many articles you write a month, you're going to need to develop skills in editorial management, which is what I do for a living. So you got to become me, the guy who hires people like you to do stuff for us. That's how you're going to find real stability. And the way you get there is by cultivating a relationship with your editor where they start trusting you with more and more duties, with more and more things to do. So if I put someone else in charge of freelancers, that person is on their way to a career in editorial management. This is the structure. That's how it functions. So if your whole thing is like, you know what, I just want to write about Marvel Comics and Star Wars, unfortunately, that is not a particularly realistic outlook on doing this for a real living, like being able to make your car payment with this stuff. So that's sort of the reality of the job market as it currently exists. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you look for in a writer doing interest feed articles? Because what she does is, it's the current, really. It was the future a few years ago, but it's the current of entertainment journalism. Fun things that people click on. Look at this crazy thing. Look at this wacky thing. Look at this fun product. You know, it sounds a little click downy, but I don't mean it this way. It's sort of BuzzFeed. That's what people look for, but it's what people click on. And so when you talk about, like, if someone's going to come write for you, what do you look for?
Yeah, so first of all, if you do read Japanese, I'm always looking for interns. I take on maybe like 2 interns a semester. And so that's number one, because most of our sources are Japanese. So that's obviously is really helpful if you can read Japanese, and I don't have to like get something translated and then send it back to you, etc. Another thing is that this sounds basic, but really you should know your English grammar, and a lot of people don't. And the only way to really get better at it is just read a lot and read real things. Don't read like Twitter and BuzzFeed. But it's, just being able to write is it sounds so basic, but a lot of the people who come to me, they don't possess that at all. And sometimes I'll get emails with, if you're gonna email someone out of the blue, don't, spell check that shit like several times, because if I see a typo, I'm not even gonna respond to the email. So that's one thing. And another thing is that there is a difference between writing like serious stuff and between writing something that is fun and entertaining. With the interest feed, like I said, it is kind of the fuzzier, lighter side of news. We're not writing about, I don't know, Trigger's newest anime or Benghazi or something, right? We're talking about like, oh, here's this One Piece figurine where Luffy's face is getting smashed together. Like it's stuff that's really lighthearted, but you, as a writer, you have to present it in a way that's entertaining, but also not patronizing. There's a lot of internet journalists out there who I think are really patronizing, and that doesn't help. You can't, even though you're doing this every day, you can't be cynical. It's hard, but you have to have, so basically, know Japanese, know how to write, and just have like a genuine enthusiasm for something, because that's absolutely gonna shine through when you are writing about stuff that is lighthearted and fluffy.
Yeah, and specifically when you're writing in genre entertainment work like this, people can smell cynicism from a mile away. So if they get even a hint of it in an article that's supposed to be fun, they're gonna, why do you hate me and my friends and everything that I love? And we'll talk a little bit about what to expect from your audience a little later. But okay, but yeah, so. It's really important that the sense of enthusiasm is there and it's genuine, because they will be able to tell. Like it's a tough work out there doing that stuff. For editorial, if you want to get into writing reviews for a living, first of all, the market's completely saturated, so you're going to be competing with. Right now, I haven't actually updated the job listing, but we are on the brink of hiring probably on the order of about 8 new writers at Anime News Network to do daily streaming reviews. There will be a post on the site when that job listing goes up, and the requirements for that job are many, and I'm already sitting on about 650 applications from the previous job listing. So you have a lot of competition, but there's a lot of ways that you can stand out. One of them is to make sure that your cover letter doesn't have any typos in it. You really would be surprised. Like it's like you're applying for a job as a janitor and you walk in and just start peeing on the floor. Like that's how dissonant it is. Like that's how separate it is. Like you're applying for a writing job, and the thing that you sent me to set a first impression is, I'm going to be a lot of extra work for you. I only hire people that make my job easier. That's it. Every editor works that way. You only hire people that will make your life easier, not harder. Like I'm not trying to create more work for myself. So I tend to hire people who already do a great, almost perfect job in terms of just formatting and structure and typos and grammar and all that stuff. Like they get that stuff right out of the gate.
Also, don't be an asshole in your cover letter.
Yeah,
I get a lot of that.
I get cover letters where people will suggest that they're deigning to work for me. Like, oh, I suppose I could work for Anime News Network. It's like, oh, well, thank you, Your Majesty. Like, yeah, like you gotta have a good, positive attitude, and it's great if you actually show a little respect. I mean, as much as people like to pretend that like the internet is all play pretend and it's not a real thing, this is real. This is our job. I will be your boss if you work for me. That's what happens when you make me mad. But some measure of respect and not coming to me with a giant ego and expecting me to genuflect to you, that's important. You'd be shocked at how many people don't do that. I mean, if you're applying for a job, you're nice to the guy that's going to hire you, right? And I'm the guy making those final decisions, so it's important to just be nice. And that's all we really expect is nice, because effectively what you're doing is, hey, we're going to work together. And if you come at me with an attitude that's positive and pleasant, I'm going to want to work with you. And it's a choice that I have to make. So that's really important. Just be nice. But in terms of what you're looking for in an editorial, so what I look for is a strong voice, strong opinion. A lot of writing out there is what I like to call sort of mealy-mouthed, just mush. Like, it's not really an opinion, it's a summary, and then the attitude that comes across is just sort of blind consumption. So like, in any given season right now, in a season of anime, we get 40-some shows. And if you're watching 20 of them, and you're just sort of going through them like candy, and you're like, that was fine, B+, next, that was fine, B+, next, I am not interested in your writing, because that's not critical thinking, it's not very engaging, it's not fun to read. What the audience wants is somebody who cares and has a strong opinion, and you're not always going to have a strong opinion about everything, but the important thing is that you can write in an engaging way about something that maybe isn't all that interesting. You have some observations. Maybe this show that's like C+ material at best gets you to also talk about some other trend or some other thing that you noticed, or you have to make it interesting and engaging, and that's what I look for, because that's what people click on. It's also how you build an audience. You get people coming to you because they want to hear your voice. They're not just looking for any voice, they want your voice. And that's what we try to hire at the News Network, is people who garner an actual audience for themselves. It's not just sort of mush. Yeah, it's really distracting. It's really hard to do this. So that's important. And also, and this is also very important, and it's not a symptom necessarily of like people are stupid or anything, but the internet's sort of the Wild West when it comes to this kind of thing, and most people are used to just writing for themselves. So they have a Tumblr, they have a Blogger account or something, and they don't know what taking editorial direction is like. Now, unfortunately, what this breeds are people who can't take editorial direction and treat their own words as though they're gospel. And I'm not interested in taking any kind of correction, or if you tell me my tone is off, or if I'm being rude or something in the way I'm phrasing my opinion is guaranteed to light the forums on fire, and for no good reason, not just because somebody's being really inflammatory. They'll argue with me. They'll tell me like, well, no, my friend said it was great. Your friend doesn't work here. Like, why are you telling me that? Like, I've run people through the application process, and they'll send in writing samples, and I'll send them editorial feedback on their writing samples, and they will get scared and run away. And that just tells me they weren't right for the job. You have to be willing to take direction. That's the whole point. You're working with a team of people. It's not just your blog, it's not just your Tumblr. There's a hierarchy that you're going through in order to get published, and just having respect for that hierarchy will do wonders for you. So just be ready to have your writing challenged a little bit. Somebody, not in a rude way, but I will go to you and say like, hey, maybe your tone on this one's a little off, or what do you mean by this? Or you said this was a translation problem, but is it a translation problem, or is it a just an English problem? Like, what do you really mean? And you just got to be able to take notes, willing to take notes and make changes that your editor asks you to do. Every publication that doesn't just let you publish whatever the heck you feel like at any time of day, which is every place that's going to pay you to write, will make those requirements of you. So that's a really important skill set to have. It's just being able to work with an editor. It's just a basic fact of the job that a lot of people don't know anything about, and frankly, like when they get a taste of it, they don't care for it because they're so used to just being able to, vomit whatever they want all over the page and hit posts, and who cares, and that's fine. But you get to go, you can do that on your own and not get paid for it.
And another really important thing is that because a lot of this type of work tends to be online, you have to, like, if you're not used to being in communication with your editor, like via email or via AIM or whatever it is, when they expect you to be working, like, then you need to learn to do that. It drives me crazy if I try to give somebody feedback and I don't hear back from them for 3 days. Like, that's not okay if you work online. That's, like, if I can't walk down the hall and knock on your office door, well, then you know, online, like, if I email you, you need to email back.
Yeah.
Which is, it's things like this that sound basic, but that they make a huge difference.
Yeah, because we run into so many people that don't do it or won't do it. Like, you'll set up a clear communication expectation, like, I need you to get back to me on this within 3 hours, and it's the middle of the day, it's the middle of business hours, and they just don't. They just don't. And you're like, well, where were you? What were you doing? And they're like, I was watching TV. And you're like, well, I'm glad this job is a high priority for you. Like, and all of this sort of falls under be professional, trying to be professional. That's the kind of professionalism that counts. It's when you're working with other people and you can work with other people well. All that stuff it's very important.
And also, like, the world of anime journalism is very, very small.
Yeah.
So if you have a reputation for not being professional, not only will we remembered forever, but we will tell other people who are thinking about hiring you. Like, you can't be a dick. You can't, you can't be a shit to your editor. You can't just disappear for a week. If I have a writer, so like, if I have a writer who I don't think does good work, when someone else comes to me and says, hey, I noticed that this person has done work for you in the past, like, I'm thinking about hiring him or her, I'll be like, well, then don't, you shouldn't. So you have to remember, like, it is a job. You're writing about cartoons, but it is a job.
Yeah, and we like to sit around and say, I just write about cartoons, haha, but this is real, it's real work. It's people's livelihoods depend on it, and millions of people read it. So it's just as legitimate as any other line of journalism, entertainment journalism anyway. It's the same. So take it seriously, not too seriously, and never take yourself too seriously. That's really important. But the job itself is a serious gig. So that's important to remember. In terms of dealing with an audience, and especially if you write reviews, you're going to be dealing with a lot of abuse. Now, there are certain ways to deal with this that are good, and then there are ways to deal with it that are not good. It's one of the things where you're just going to have to get used to people screaming in your face that you're wrong, and all they do is disagree with you about a TV show. But you will get the most withering personal insults day in and day out, especially if you're active on Twitter, just attacked constantly for it. You kind of have to prepare yourself for it. Doesn't mean you have to tolerate it. You don't have to just sit there and take it. And the internet has like this weird double standard where the people complaining at you will sit there and just fling feces at you all day because they don't like what you said about a TV show. If you say anything back that's even remotely close to their tone, then they'll start screaming at you that they're unprofessional. So it's basically like, I'm going to sit here and jab you with a stick. And if you say, knock it off, they say, hey, you can't do that. Like, I'm going to tell you to stop poking me with the stick. And you kind of have to be a little diplomatic about it at first and, use the block button on Twitter and the mute button on Twitter. But you can't ignore your readership. The trick is to manage your expectations. Do not tolerate abuse because then people will walk all over you. But get used to dealing, like having an audience is one of those things that's really difficult to get used to now, especially because people are they get so worked up and they get so passionate about it. And sometimes the people who are being mean to you do have good intentions in mind. They are just trying to give you feedback. They're just rude dicks about it.
Although they're always nice in person.
Yeah, they're always nice in person. It's very different in person. It's always different in person. But managing those expectations and learning how to work with your audience is going to be one of the toughest parts of the job. And if you can't do it appropriately, so like if someone's calling you names and you just start calling them names back, that's a situation where you might be removed from the position. And not that necessarily that's fair, but you do kind of have to be the bigger person in most cases. I'm pretty lenient. AMA News Network is actually one of the most lenient organizations when it comes to this kind of thing. I don't expect my writers to just sit there and take abuse. So I'm very lenient when it comes to them talking back. When they tell when somebody is being really, really mean and rude, and if they say like, hey, I don't care what you think, or like, they rebut, they don't get fired for that. A lot of organizations are super skittish about this kind of thing. They're so worried about losing readers that they'll fire anyone who dares speak back to someone who's being horribly verbally abusive to them. I think that's wrong. Anime News Network doesn't do it and will never do it so long as I'm in charge. But I do draw a line somewhere. So if someone's calling one of my writers the C word and they say, well, yeah, you're a C word, I'll say, hey, maybe not like that. But, that's one of those things you gotta learn how to deal with. Our forums do have a reputation for being pretty tough, but they're not as bad as a lot of other places. So, read Kotaku comments if you want, like, an example of as bad as it can really get. And their writers, they talk back too. I mean, Gawker writers don't take any crap, for the most part. So, it's just, you gotta sort of weigh it in your mind. And something to really think about if you want to get into writing reviews is you will have to deal with the public, and the public is mean on the internet. So, something to think about. Definitely something to keep in mind. You don't really deal with too much of that on Interest Feed, except them constantly calling into question your journalistic integrity for writing about something they don't care about or something like that. Like, that's largely what you get. We're not taking questions yet, but what's up? Okay. Last thing I want to talk about before we do take some questions here. If you're interested in applying for a job as a writer, the most important thing you need to have are writing samples. Having writing samples and promptly replying to any interest that I might show. If I send you an email back saying, okay, I liked your samples, what else you got? Or, are you okay with this pay scale? Or when would you like to start? I expect to hear back from you right away. Like, I want you to be excited about getting the job. But having those writing samples is actually more important than anything else. Your resume, I will skim your resume, but I will carefully read your writing samples, because that's the most important thing. I actually don't really care about your level of education. I don't care what your degree is in. You don't need a journalism degree to write reviews. I don't think any of our people who write reviews have journalism degrees, because it's not the skill set you need in order to be effective at maintaining an audience through opinion writing. So your writing sample is the most important thing. If I had a suggestion on how to maintain that, start a Tumblr, write reviews, or a Tumblr or a blog account or something. Just every day, if you feel like it, or every week, write a review of an episode you saw, just to keep your skills sharp and to have an example of, here's how I want to be represented in front of someone who could potentially pay me to do this. You need to have that. Just telling me you want to do it isn't, I don't care. That's great, everyone wants to do it. You gotta have those samples. And so don't worry too much about your level of education. I will say you are at a serious disadvantage if you were in high school. I tend to not hire high schoolers, and frankly most publications don't, just because they know you're not gonna have a lot of time. They know that you're not going to be particularly professional, even whether or not that's fair, I don't know, but I've never had a positive experience working with a high school kid. And even college, people who are still deeply mired in an undergraduate career tend to be unreliable because their schoolwork always comes first. And so it's hard to get good work out of them. And there is a mountain of wannabe professional writers out there who aren't in school who want those jobs. So that's sort of your competition. And being in school is a little bit of a liability. That does not say we don't hire college kids. And for internships, it's obviously a big requirement. But it's important just to keep that in mind, that your level of education isn't necessarily that big a deal. What's important are those writing samples, because that's what I care about the most. What would you say is like the most important thing for writing news, aside from the stuff that was through?
Well, so for the interest feed, for the internship program, obviously that's different because I look for college students, and probably those in maybe their last 2 years or so, or some of it a little bit later in college. If you do want to write for the interest feed, all internship applications go through the same email address, but you could just say like, hey, I am specifically interested in writing for the interest feed, and that would be forwarded to me. Otherwise, it doesn't get forwarded to me. So if that is something you're interested, just mention it. I don't really care about your resume. I will look at your cover letter, but usually what happens is that if I see someone who is excited about it, like I will usually Skype them or call them and we'll actually talk about it. So when that happens, be lively, be engaging, and that's a lot of what I look for in the industry. I tend to hire people who I think have a personality, who are going to be able to write fun content for me. If you're really kind of aloof and quiet over the phone, I don't think you would necessarily be a good fit for the interest feed.
Right. And one thing actually we should mention is diversification of what you write about is super important, especially if you're starting out as a freelancer. You want to have a wide variety of things you can write about, so you can have a wide variety of places that potentially pay you to do it. From what I understand in the gaming space, those opportunities are shrinking. Some publications are starting to go to waver a little bit, and there are fewer opportunities just purely writing about video games. A couple of years ago, I think it was a little bit more viable to just be a games writer. Now, as a freelancer, you want to be much more diversified than that. So you'll want those gaming gigs. They pay pretty well, from what I understand, for the most part. But if you can write about that, and anime, and American television, and movies, and whatever else, all that does is open up your potential for earning. All that does is make it so that you can work virtually anywhere for whatever they're willing to pay you. And a lot of people do this now, but honestly, if you're good at something, don't do it for free. Do not take those exposure jobs. They are going to use you. They will not ever start paying you, and they'll just keep telling you it's for exposure. When jobs open up at those locations, they know you'll do it for free, so they're not going to start paying you. It's a myth. It's usury. I really hate that, and a lot of places have turned it into a business model. This is how Huffington Post operates. They don't pay anybody there except Ariana Huffington and a handful of editors. And a lot of places, that's it. That's their scheme. I'm going to become literally a millionaire off of this website by not paying my workforce because everybody wants to be a name on the internet. Don't take those jobs if you want it to turn into anything that eventually pays you. If you just need the experience, yeah, but don't take it seriously and don't stay there very long.
You're a lot better off practicing your writing on your blog, on your Tumblr, or whatever, and getting a job. Because otherwise, you're going to be burning away your hours working for a website that doesn't give a shit about you, and it's not worth it.
Yeah, I know people that have given themselves stress disorders trying to meet deadlines for a publication that wasn't paying them, and they're just like, oh, it's really important to get my name out there, and it's like, man, you're killing yourself for nothing. There's no point in just doing it for free. I understand you really love the material, you're really enthusiastic about it. Cool, but the minute this stuff, and this is actually really important, the minute you start doing this for a living, it stops being your hobby and it starts being your job. So you're not really going to want to spend your free time, if you're watching anime for your job, your free time, you're going to want to do something else. And if you're filling up all of your free time hours, turning what you used to love into basically a chore, you're going to start hating it. Passion's going to go away, enthusiasm will leave you, and then when the opportunities for pay come around, you're going to be jaded, you're going to be not very interested in it, and that's going to show in your writing, and any editor will be able to see it from a mile away. So those 4 exposure jobs can burn you out and kind of wreck you before you even get started. So just be really careful about that stuff. There's so many places on the internet that just want to use you and not pay you for your time, and it's unfortunately a trend in business models for publications. So careful, be careful with that stuff. What? Well, it pays the people to add revenue. Anyway, do we have any questions? Okay, you first.
I was wondering if you guys were interested in videography.
No, I was, and the bottom fell out of all of that. You want to talk about a saturated market, you want to talk about people who stare into a camera and rant about, I'm the angry ranting anime nerd, like, guess what I don't want? That. It's tired, it's old, and rarely do those people, like, they're trying to build a cult of personality around themselves. The content is rarely any good. And there's really no money in it. The traffic isn't there. Like, the heyday of the angry video game nerd and that guy with the glasses, it's over. It's over. Like, Blip, or Disney bought Maker, which purchased Blip, which is where all that guy with the glasses stuff is. You see the traffic for it and what they're earning off of it now? No. And for a publication like ours, or any publication, we have to pay for the bandwidth on that video unless we want all of our money going to YouTube. So it's just not worth it. The video stuff just ain't worth it. We're going to be experimenting with video reviews so that there might be a video component in addition to a written component, but that will just be to serve the audience that wants the video content in addition to the writing, not to cultivate some sort of cult of personality thing where some guy's mugging into the camera wearing a trilby and then there's like video clips of Trigun or Attack on Titan or something. Man, I don't want it. So, and frankly, like every other site that I've talked to, they don't want that stuff either. Like that's over. Oh, sorry, Pope's down in front here. Yeah, so get that out of your head if that's your plan. I'm sorry, he had one first here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, when you're looking at like the samples of work, specifically what you use can be like any type of writing that has some sort of...
That's a good question. Opinion is really important. The worst thing I get are, here's my paper on World War II as reflected through episode 5 of Attack on Titan. Like, I don't care, I'm not gonna read that. Like, academic papers it's a completely different skill set. It is designed to help you through academia. No place else is that publishable. So, I mean, it is in academic journals and stuff, but not on an opinion-based entertainment news site. So academic papers, please don't submit those. Don't submit them to anybody looking for editorial work. What I did when I was a freelancer was I would just write an article in the style of the publication that I was trying to get hired at and submit that as my writing sample. If somebody says like, I need to hire someone to pick up this bag, I need you to pick it up like this. You would walk up and try to pick it up the bag in the way that they want you to pick up the bag. If you can do that, just do that. That's the fastest way to get hired there is you're already conforming to what they want from you. So I love it when people do that. They're like, hey, I love the spring preview guide. I wrote 3 preview guide entries here. And those are great. Those are perfect samples. Like you're just showing me what I'm gonna get from you and there's no mystery. And I can just say yay or nay based on the quality of your writing. It's perfect. But not everyone has time for that. And if you do it in your own style on your Tumblr or whatever, that's fine too. But yeah, if you have time and you really want to get hired at a place and you're happy with the rates that they pay, put a little effort into your samples and write something just for them. It shouldn't take you too long. So yeah, good question. You were same thing. Right there? Right there.
You said you guys were going to start hiring.
Yeah.
You know when
Well, we're accepting applications now. The job listing's already up. It just doesn't change to fit because. Okay, so she used to write a column called The Stream, which was one person reviewing like 20 shows, and I decided we're not doing it that way anymore. The new requirements will be one person covering no more than 3 shows per season. I'm going to hire enough people to fill out the entire season, so it's going to be, there will be slots for currently existing reviewers if they want to take them, but they might not want to do that. So I'm going to be hiring, like I said, up to probably a max of like 10 people to cover things. The pay scale is going to be a little bit different, but soon we will be hiring. The current plan is to launch, and these will be daily streaming reviews. So like the AV Club, like how the AV Club does it, where every day you can go and read the review of last night's episode. That's what we're going to be doing. We plan to launch that by the end of July. So this month is your time. And yeah, well, if you already sent an application in, yeah, I know. This has been a very long process, like getting all this set up and figuring out the best way to do it. I started this back in October, and I'm just now starting to get it off the ground. If you send in your application, I'm going to be encouraging people to resubmit because we got so many, and I want people who are still interested in the job to basically just send me whatever you sent before. So, yeah, absolutely. Whatever you want to send. Like, it's just going to be like, if you applied for this, don't worry, we didn't reject you. Resend whatever you want to resend. If you want to send something different, send something different. It's fine, we're open to everything, and I want to make sure everybody who wants to be considered for the job gets considered. So just keep an eye out on the front page. Sometime probably next week, once we're done with the preview guide, I will post a new job listing, and there will be an invitation in there for everybody who submitted before to resubmit. So, yeah, good luck. Right there.
So, during the presentation, you encourage people to work on their own writing rather than taking positions that just give them
Exposure.
Yeah, does that imply that in the hiring process, how much your name is out there, how much exposure you have, isn't really taken into account compared to your writing ability?
I'll tell you, the only time somebody's prior exposure really matters is when you were already working for a publication that was paying you to write. I'll get people who are, and this is absolutely like he's a good friend of mine, but Chris Beveridge, he runs the Fandom Post. He doesn't pay his writers. He can't. If you write for the Fandom Post, I'm happy to see your samples, but I'm not going to take your work for him into consideration in terms of professionalism or able to meet deadlines because it wasn't a paid position. So it's a different mindset, it's a different skill set. That doesn't necessarily matter. If you were working for, say, Otaku USA, that makes a little bit of a difference, but like I said, the strength of your writing samples is the most important thing. So if you're an absolute nobody and never been published anywhere for any reason, but I love your writing, I'm going to hire you, provided you can meet deadlines. But yeah, right there.
So what are the best methods you think to search for the actual jobs?
Well, honestly, your options are super limited. We pay people to write, and part of the reason that I'm running this panel is because I know we're one of the 3 places that pay people to write. It's just the reality of the internet. We pay, Crunchyroll News pays, but they only hire news writers, and I think they're full, and I think a lot of their writers are paid with Crunchyroll subscriptions, so it's not like an actual paycheck. It's reality of the internet. None of this is intended to be insulting or anything. This is the economy. Japan Editor, I think, pays per article, but they just laid off, Destructoid just laid off, everyone that was pulling a salary there. So, careful with that one. Who else? Pays to write about anime. I mean, you can get a job at IO9, and Kotaku occasionally, Kotaku runs articles about anime that I don't. Sword Art Online is the smartest show I've ever seen. Okay, Richard. Yeah. No offense to him, he's a good guy. But they do pay. I know working for Gawker is really stressful, but those are sort of the places you want to start. And usually they will list editorial jobs at the bottom. Video games, you might have a better chance. Giant Bomb just hired a guy, but that was all super internal. Keep an eye on Polygon. I know they occasionally hire writers. Game Informer, if you want to write about video games. But in terms of just anime, yeah, there's 3 places that actually pay that I know of. So good luck, I guess.
Topless Robot.
Topless Robot does. They pay. Like I said, they have our same pay structure.
They actually take freelance pitches too.
And they do. Yeah, Topless Robot takes freelance pitches. So you can email the editor of Topless Robot and say, I want to do the top 10, blah, blah, blah. And he'll say, all right, pay $75 for it. So that's actually a great place to start. I'm sure he's flooded. Maybe he's flooded with pitches, but most people don't even take that plunge. They won't take that risk because it's just, you got to pitch an article, and that's a little scary because what if your idea is dumb? So yeah, give it a shot. But very few places, in terms of anime specifically, A&M is one of your only outlets.
I would encourage you though to have like a broad knowledge base. Like if you only watch magical girl shows and that's the only thing you watch, you're not going to be that useful, because if someone says, okay, well I need you to write this thing about this shonen show, and like you have nothing to say about it whatsoever, like it's not going to be useful. So if you do want to write about anime, like you know, try to make an effort to not also keep up to date with like what's going on in the anime world and anime news in the industry, but also like try to expand into different genres, even if you don't like the genres. Like that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I should mention that specifically the jobs that I'm going to be hiring for coming up, I will be looking for people who like those genres and are thinking critically about them. Like, there's a big gray area in between, I love everything and I really like this genre, but you can trust me to give you the good examples of it. Like, I really love harem shows, but I only like the good ones. Like, that's what I want, is that guy who likes the good ones, not just blindly, if it's got these tropes in it, I love it. Like, okay, you know, that's great, go right on your Tumblr. But I want critical thinkers, people who really love it in a way that they're also thinking about what they watch and they're capable of giving strong recommendations. So that's important.
Yeah, although that is different between
It's different.
writing like reviews like versus writing for the interest feed or for the news
Yeah.
feed. You know, for us, like, I don't really care what you like as long as you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
And actually, this brings me to another point. If you are interested in working in news or interest at all, the most important thing is that you get your facts straight. That is the most important thing, because your editor can't know everything about every show. There's hundreds of shows a year, so you have to get your facts straight. It's actually more important than typos. People think, like, it's the internet, there's typos in Rolling Stone and the New York Times. They're everywhere. That's because editorial departments are usually one person or two people. Right now, our editorial department consists of one person, me, and after 10 years in this job, I just was given the budget to hire an assistant. So that's how small these editorial departments are. That's why you see typos and things, because there used to be 4 people looking at something before it would get posted. Now there's 1. So get your facts straight. Like, know what you're talking about. Super important.
Also, just learn to use Google. Like some of my interns, like they don't know how to use Google, and it blows my mind. Just Google it.
Yeah.
If you ask me a question and I can Google it for you,
You've wasted my time.
Fine.
You have wasted my time. Yeah, totally. With the guy back there?
How highly do you rate academic background on your application?
Like I said, I really don't. I prefer people who are out of school just because of a time commitment thing and being able to meet deadlines. We got 5 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay. I don't really rate it that high. Academic writing tends to actually hamper your writing skill for an opinion place. People tend to write really cold and without any personality and really clinical. And like, I get, for some reason, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because nerds, but engineers and tech, like IT guys, really want to be anime critics. I swear 60% of the applications are like, well, I work at Intel and I just really want to write about Senran Kagura or whatever the hell. And they're writing, because they come from that academic background, they come from a technical background, it's super cold and they're categorizing things and it's like they just put things in little boxes. And that's because that's their skill set, that's how their mind works. Now, I look for somebody with a little bit more of an artistic flair, maybe a little bit more right-brained.
although I have a science background.
You do, you do. But I'm not saying it's true for everybody. But I'm saying, we have engineers that write for us and they do a great job. I'm not saying they're all like that, of course not. But that's a thing, and you need to kind of bust out of that real clinical, cold academic writing style if you want to get a good job writing opinion.
So, what you were saying about professionals being anime fans, a good example is John Lasseter. He's a huge anime fan.
Yep, and he basically runs Disney's animation department.
I mean, how do you think Disney was able to get the rights to different stuff in the studio over here?
I don't know.
Because of John Lasseter.
Yep. All right. You have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know if there's any sort of fundamental
would say your audience expects you to be familiar with anime to the point where you're making exceptions for something that has like terrible writing because it's anime. They're like, "Oh, but it's based on a light novel," and it's like, you're like, this first step, okay, so like here's an example. There was a show that premiered this last spring called The Irregular at Magic High School. That was garbage, like it was terrible, but it was based on this light novel series that had its fans, and the fans would show up and argue that, no, this isn't badly written, and, well, you just wait and see. And it's like, if I watch the first episode of a TV show and someone comes up to me and says, it's going to get real good around episode 58, I'm like, I'm at peace, like I'm done. Yeah, so let me finish. So they're going to expect you to know that stuff. Whether or not your editor expects you to fall in line with those expectations is another matter. I don't expect my writers to know everything about every light novel. What I want is their opinion on the TV show that they watched, and I want it to be a thoughtful, well-considered, interesting, and fun to read. That's what I consider important. But there are places that might hire you that will think the most important things, that you know everything about every franchise. It's just an audience expectation game, and anime is so commoditized, and it's such a commercial product. Like, these things are all mostly designed by committee. There is occasionally a lot of art in it, and sometimes there's no art in it at all. It's just commerce. And hey, that's all television, that's all entertainment, it's not just anime, but anime is so heavily commoditized, and the audience has such specific expectations for it, that I think it is kind of important that you understand what the audience wants out of a show, and that should be a consideration when you're writing about it. It can be tough, and you can miss things. Like, we've had episodes of shows go up where somebody was like, what is this? And the fans of it know exactly what's up with it, and the writer will have effectively sort of missed the point because they didn't know, and this thing is so commoditized, and it's just designed to sell to this one crowd, and it's the only people they care about when they were making it. So yeah, it's tough. It can be really tough. You do have to know your stuff, like we said. You kind of gotta know. But the most important thing is your carefully considered, critically thoughtful reaction to the TV show that you watched. That's the important thing.
One important thing to realize, though, and remember is that a review is not the same thing as the plot synopsis. And many, many, many times, I see people's reviews, which is just telling you what happened.
And then this happened. And then this happened. Well, thank you. It's good to know. Right there.
How important is like a fluid tone like the show, or like in your writing samples to show, just how varied you're going to be from place to place?
Well, it's up to you. That's a very personal decision to make. It's how you want your voice to sound. I tend to avoid people who write in a heavily personal blog type tone. Like people who use I a lot, I tend to kind of avoid that a little bit just because it can get so personal and so it can feel like it's so subjective that you're like, well, why am I reading this? Because this guy's just like, I went to the store the other day and bought this bag of chips and it reminded me of this scene. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but it's not really. You need to speak with a little bit of authority, not too much, but a little bit. And your tone is something you sort of need to police on your own. Your editor will tell you what they want, but when it comes to tone, I would avoid gimmicks, I wouldn't get too personal, and I would try to, you want to strike a balance between authoritative and also with the understanding that this is my subjective opinion. So that's a tough question and a tough line to walk. Over there?
When it comes to submitting writing samples, is there like sort of a magic number of how much or how many articles to send in of your past work?
I can only tell you for me it's two articles. I'm not going to read more than that. And frankly, like if you keep the word count under 2,000, I might read the whole thing. So that's 2 articles, max 4,000 words between the 2 of them, I would say. Shorter is better because I just need a taste. I don't need the whole sandwich, as it were. Over there.
How do you feel about mixing opinion with social justice, and in terms of reviewing like an episode, like there could be one where they're talking about panty shots,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it becomes all about like feminism and.
Right. I actually get that question a lot now because a lot of people are. I'm an anime critic from a social justice perspective. Cool. That's the kind of content that belongs on a website that is dedicated to that kind of content. if I were to suddenly start publishing, and I'm extremely sympathetic to a lot of that stuff, like I'm as progressive as they come, but my audience doesn't want your review to just be, here's everything through the perspective of gender studies, here's everything through the perspective of race. They just want your opinion on the show. Now, if you're reviewing a show that is super overt with all that stuff, like your regular Magic High School, which is basically Ayn Rand, the TV show, and you don't talk about that, to me that tells me you weren't really thinking about what you were watching, but it's gotta be pretty overt. And fan service and stuff is so prevalent in anime, it's just part of what sells the show, that if you're submitting and every time there's a sexualized character on screen, it turns into an essay on feminism, I have to reconsider because the audience isn't looking for that. And as much as I might sympathize or be interested in reading that, it's not what I'm publishing. So you gotta be careful with that stuff. If you want to write about that stuff exclusively, if you want that to be in your writing, there are sites that specialize in that, and you should try to get hired there. That would be your best bet, I think. I think we are out of time. Yeah, we're out of time. We are done. So thank you very much for showing up. I hope